So what are the benefits of having a home studio versus an external studio? So spoiler alert, I actually have a home studio where I am now and an external studio at a gallery at Collective Haunt. So I obviously like both scenarios, but what I'm going to do today is break down the positives and the negatives of both so you can make your own decision. Hello lovelies, thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Michelle and I post on this channel about my creativity and creative motivation. So if that sounds like fun to you, then please subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more videos like this. We will start with the home studio, and the biggest factor is convenience. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to do my art practice all hours of day. Night times usually during the week because I work a full-time day job, and it's very, very handy having this home studio here because I have no travel time at all, no cost because it's just part of my house. So it's just the normal house cost, whether it be mortgage or rent. So it's very, very convenient. So I think that's one of the main advantages of having a home studio. You're already here, you can just designate a part of your house to be your studio. And the thing is, when it's in your home, it doesn't have to be a separate room like I have here. It could also be a corner of your kitchen. It can be a separate bedroom. It can be a corner of your dining room. Really, it's up to you how your house is configured. Also, some art practices need more room than others, and some are messier than others. Because I work in textiles, I can work in a room that's got carpet. It's completely fine. If you're a large format painter, you may want an area that is like a wet area that you can just clean paint off of surfaces. You might want a garage or something like that. So whatever your art practice is will determine what type of space that you need at home. The other main benefit of having a home studio is that you can fit your art practice around your everyday life more easily. Because there's no travel time, you can just squeeze in 10 minutes of your art practice while you're waiting for something else, or just before you go to bed, or just any time around your general life. You don't need to be traveling somewhere else to do your art practice. So if you're someone who likes to fit in small amounts of time doing your art practice, then a home studio is absolutely perfect. Now, what are the disadvantages of having a home studio? Well, the most obvious one is that you may not have any room at home for your art practice at all. As I said before, if you live in a fairly small home and your art practice is doing really large format, or if you can see in the background, I have two rather large looms. So if I've got a smaller space to work in, I may not be able to physically fit them in. So you do need the physical space to be able to work. Of course, if you work in a smaller format, you can squeeze yourself in anywhere, but if you work in a larger format, it may be a little bit more difficult. Another disadvantage is that there are distractions at home. So when you are doing your work from home, there's always housework to be done, washing, partners coming and chatting to you. There are always distractions. So usually when I'm working in this room, I'm not working solidly for a certain amount of hours. I'm always getting up, doing things, doing household things, chatting. So you do have that distraction. Also, you've got the kitchen nearby, and so it's easier to go and have a snack, go and grab a coffee, and distract yourself when you should be working. So it does tend to enhance procrastination because you've got other things that you could be doing. The other disadvantage to having a home studio is that you may find it hard to switch off from your family life and your art practice if that's something that bothers you. So for me personally, I am quite happy to dedicate my time to my art practice, and if I need to switch off, I'll actually leave the house. But some people may find it difficult, especially if you've got kids, to actually get your art practice done from home because you've got kids interrupting you all the time and you find it hard to delineate between those areas of your life. So in that instance, it may be easier for you to have an external studio. So let's talk now about an external studio. Now, the main advantage to having an external studio is networking. It's so great being part of a working studio collective where you can talk to other artists, you can be inspired by other artists, you can ask them for advice, and that's something that I really love about being part of Collective Haunt. You have a whole community of other artists that you can bounce ideas off of. Of course, not everyone who has an external studio works in a sort of artist collective. Some people have their own distinct space that they don't interact with anyone else. But usually well, in Adelaide anyway, a lot of the studio spaces are sort of collectives, and that way it's great to do a lot of networking. Also, being part of that kind of studio, it does give you quite a lot of advantages. So I get included in exhibitions because they're group exhibitions with the other artists. So the networking and marketing aspect of being in that sort of studio is absolutely fantastic. If the studio space that you're working in is open to the public, then of course that's another advantage. People can come and see your work who wouldn't normally get to see what you do. So I have my studio space set up as a bit of a gallery, so anyone walking into my space, even if I'm not there, can see a lot of the work that I do. So it's a bit like having a permanent exhibition up. So that's another advantage if your studio is open to the public. Of course, not all studio spaces are open to the public, but that's something to consider if you are looking for an external studio to work in. And one of the other advantages to having an external studio is that you can just work without any distractions. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. If you're a bit stuck, you've got nothing to procrastinate with, but I find being in the studio for 4 or 5 hours at a time, I can get so much work done. And if I'm really, really stuck, I can always just go home. So most of the time, having that dedicated time to do my work, that normally means that I can figure out what I need to figure out without any distractions, and I can solidly work for that period of time. Of course, there's always distractions if there are other artists around to chat to, but generally you can just work without any distractions at all. Another advantage to having an external studio is very much dependent on where you live and where the studio space is. But for me, an advantage is I can have a home base closer to the city than where I actually live. So this is not going to be for everybody, but for me personally, I live quite a fair way out from the city. So having a studio space closer to the city means it's easier for some people to come and visit me. So that's why I have that as a pickup point for artwork or my hand wovens, because it is more centralized to most people. So that's something else to think about when you're deciding where to have your studio. So what are the disadvantages to having an external studio? Well, I think the biggest disadvantage is the fact of cost. You will need to pay for an external studio space, and how much that costs per month depends on what area you live in, what suburb the studio is in, and any other costs associated with being part of a collective or part of another kind of building space. So that will be different depending on which part of the world that you are from. Now, the other disadvantage is, of course, the travel time. So if you're lucky enough to have a studio very close to home, then you don't even need to worry about this one at all. But for me, my studio is about a 35-minute drive from where I live. So the time is a bit prohibitive. I can't just nip down, work in my studio for half an hour and then come home, because it takes me more than that to get there. So if I'm going to the studio, I really need to plan to be there the whole day. Otherwise, it's just not worth going in. So that is another factor to consider. In summary, personally, I find it very, very valuable to have an external studio space as well as a home studio, but that will be different for everybody. There are quite a few artists at the gallery that I work from that have both, but there are also quite a few artists that only have their studio space at Collective Haunt. So it really does depend on personal situation. Now, I know there are quite a lot of artists there who are parents, and they use their time at the gallery to kind of get away from the family and have their dedicated art practice time. But again, it depends on your particular situation. If you're lucky enough to have a supportive partner who could look after the kids, then that may be ideal for you. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you have a home studio? Do you have an external studio? Or do you have both? Let me know, or let me know if you're looking for one or the other, and we can have a discussion in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed this short video. Please, again, like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!